So often when we're in Israel, after we're in Galilee, we make our way down south a little bit to a place called Beth Shean, Scythopolis, and we get a chance to do a little bit of teaching there because it has all this history in the ancient Near East and in Israel, but eventually it will have this history for the time of Christ and even after that as a Greco-Roman area. And so there's the place Scythopolis is one of the 10 cities. It actually becomes the capital of the 10 cities. But I want to kind of show you a connection point that we think is really valuable, and it's the reason that we came and we shot this here right kind of by the casinos, because in essence, for a Jewish boy or girl that was living in the villages in Galilee or in those regions, for them to come down near the 10 cities and come to a place like Scythopolis, they were dealing automatically with the tension between their culture and their belief and their lifestyle and what the Hellenistic culture of the Greeks was bringing in. And so there's a passage that says this really well, where 1 John chapter 2 verses 15 to 17, John writes, "Do not love the world system or the things in the world system. If anyone loves the world system, the love of the Father is not in him. Everything in the world is from the world, not the Father. The world system and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever." And so this is where you have to realize that when they're talking about the world, they're not talking about the earthly elements. They're talking about the Hellas that was the basis of Hellenistic culture. That was the world system of their day. And this is life where you made yourself content and you made yourself happy and you made yourself fulfilled without God, without community, without faith. And what John was talking about is you had to learn how to be obedient to one world or the other. And you had to figure out who it is that you love and what is drawing your love. And John's not going to end up saying to the people, you have to totally separate yourself. He's not saying to isolate yourself. He's saying that this is contact without contamination. And so when we're often in Scythopolis, we would go to Beth Shean, which was right in a set of hills right in the center of Israel. And it was the best location for the three main roads that moved through. But at the bottom of the hill, when the Israelites returned from exile, they didn't live on tells anymore. They didn't live up on Beth Shean. They went down below and lived in Scythopolis. And then in 333 BC, Alexander the Great comes in. They bring Hellenistic culture and they build this city in the Roman period around 63 BC. And it's this massive city that has all the greatest and best pieces. It has almost 50,000 people within it. So let us put it just in context. You're a good Jewish boy or girl, 50 AD, and you are heading down to Jerusalem to maybe go do sacrifice or to go do trade, and you have to go through the city of Scythopolis. And you go through, and you're walking around, and there's all these huge buildings. Everything's gigantic. It's better, it's more innovative, it's more inspiring, and this looked like progress in the greatest way. And so their little towns, their little worlds, they revolved around their families and their community and the synagogue, their place of worship. And now you went to this place that it had all these places of worship and they had all these things that they fixated on. And so when you went to Scythopolis, you came into the city and it had everything. It had jobs galore. You didn't learn from the family anymore, you learned from your vocation. It had major trade. It had one of those agora markets with a main road that was filled with people. Just like when you're going down the main road here of South Lake Tahoe, and it's full of shops. And people are coming in and they're bringing their money and they're bringing their goods. They had worship to the god of alcohol, of wine, and pleasure. Which again, I mean, we're standing here just outside some places that are all about this. They had nice looking temples. They had Roman baths with the saunas and the baths and the gymnasiums. And they even had something that you didn't have in your Jewish city. Toilets. They had porcelain. They had real porcelain that was taken outside of the city. And the whole place was about the body and a luxurious comfort. They had amphitheaters, hippodromes, entertainment galore. You ended up having people wearing costumes and having effects, and you're getting a chance to see these tantalizing views of the body. And this is where the lessons of life and the lessons of value and teaching is coming through. And so it's here that you see those temptations that are shown to us in the book of Genesis, and that are shown to us again in Matthew 4, 1 to 11, when Jesus is tempted, where you're seeing the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boasting of what one has and does. And so you're seeing a place that's focused on cravings, and it's focused on appetites, and it's focused on strong desire. And those things aren't bad, but they're not going to satisfy us to the full. And then it's going to show you that this type of world is a world that will get out of control. That anything that we can enjoy in this life can go out of control when you start doing it in excess. And that's what these cities represented. That's what the Hellenistic culture represented. And so when John's starting to talk about living in this culture, he's saying, hey, you cannot take pleasure in and take a huge liking for and value above all others, including God and community, this world system. You have to be willing to abandon it. Because when you love something, you're obedient to it. And when you love something, you're committed to it. And he's saying this world system, it might be invisible, it might be internal, but it begins with an infatuation. And that infatuation changes anything. And I would say that he's telling us and he's challenging us, hey, you move throughout your life, you move throughout your system, and there's two things always standing and biting for your attention. Both of them are offering to fulfill us, to satisfy us, to make life rich for us. But some of it is a lie, and some of it is truth. And you have to decide which is which, but you can't go and try to do both. And this is where you'll have guys like James, the brother of Jesus, saying things in James 4:4, when he'll say, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred towards God? Or John 15, verses 18 and 19, he'll say, the world loves its own, but will hate you because you are not of it, and you've been called out of it. And so when we stand here looking at a city that's usually bustling and it's usually busy and there's the sound of casinos and there's shows going on and there's food galore, it's not meaning that you can't go to this city, that you can't come into contact with it, but you had to go in with some essential reminders. Number one, you had to remember where you come from. Who are you? Who is your king? And are you obediently following after him and his kingdom, or the kingdom of this world? And then you also have to remember these things, they're not of the Father. These things are of the systems of the world. And then John says it best in it. He says, the world and its desires are passing away. These things are not going to exist forever. They're not going to have that allure. They're not going to have that drive. They're not going to have that foundation. And so again, in Israel, but even up here in Tahoe, you see the contrast of coming from a place of spiritual growth and family and faith, and how you can walk right in, drive right in to these places and experience it. So we're going to leave you with a couple challenges, and we hope that this will be a good reminder every time you start reading about passages like 1 John 2, 15 to 17. So here's our challenge for you. When we mention this aspect of Scythopolis, Beit Shean, and a Jewish boy or girl coming into the city, we're not saying that you have to isolate yourself from these things. John isn't saying that separation means isolation. It means coming into contact, but without being contaminated by it. So what do we do with that? Can we not go? No, the reality is that you can come and take these things and go, Lord, how can I transform this? How can I speak your truth and talk about your kingdom? Even Jesus would end up taking his disciples to Caesarea Philippi, which was the Vegas of his day. It was not a place that a good Jewish boy would go. And Jesus is taking his disciples there, and it's there that he takes them to actually one of the worst areas, and he goes, who do people say that I am? And he talks about being the Son of God. And so you can come to places like this and look at ways of seeing God's kingdom and asking for his kingdom come, even in these places that are offering fulfillment and satisfaction. So look for opportunities to talk about the kingdom, to talk about the Son of God.